for the nice presentation. And I think some of the key things you talked about, your end-to-end process automation and the expectation of procurement. Everyone wants the UI UX as simple as what we see on Amazon, on B2C across these processes. So it's a journey. I think I'm sure that each organization, and you'll talk to a lot of solution providers like us and others, maybe they are somewhere in the middle. But very interesting point is, like getting the credit for all the hard work and chart you showed, and the amount of value that procurement adds, and if you look at, I think from the COVID days and till now, the number of disruptions that have happened, and procurement has been supplying material in spite of all those challenges. But somewhere that articulation around that, the benefits, I think maybe that's something, will go a long way getting a seat at the board level. I think I also saw that in some of the reports, a very good observation. So with this, I think let's get started. And so we talked about, some of the things Amit covered. I also covered in my opening keynote respect to the outlook. And so without getting into much detail, and if I just pick some themes from here, it's more around managing your risk across your supply chain, attaining your sustainable procurement across your supply base, across your geographies. And then also we'll look at the overall technology, how it can help us to deliver better. From this, if you look at, so we keep on talking about cost, and but somewhere we need to, factor the risk into the overall supply chain. And so this slide just, highlights the different kind of risk, which as procurement you have to manage. And, respect to your supply disruptions, financials in terms of not just the credit profiling of your suppliers, but today, if you look at maybe, you have one bad season, let's say in Africa, which, spoils the crop for cocoa, and you look at what happens to prices. So how do you manage, because this is your direct material, right? This is like 70% of the cost. And I'm sure there are similar examples for high-tech industry, and let's say for industrial manufacturers, and sometimes the China, suddenly start exporting, sometimes they reduce demand, and it causes havoc. So how do you, become more agile to manage those different kind of challenges? And then, different climatic changes, and, we talked about your regulations, and, and doing all that with a proper governance and policies, right? Because all of this, many of the listed companies, one single thing can have a huge impact on the brand. And especially if you look at the way the regulations are changing, and I was talking that Europe is taking a lead on your ESG, you need traceability back in the supply chain, where you are sourcing from, right? Are you complying to all those, your UK Bribery Act or Master Slavery Act, and, no child labor. So you have to ensure all that. So you have to do all those things with a proper governance and compliance. And if you look at this further, gets complicated by maybe I just picked up this chart. It shows that everyone is talking about your greenhouse gases emissions, and so 60% of that contribution is from utilities industry, or let's say your industries. And within industry, if you look at, it's like your steel, cement, and oil and gas. And then there are other industries which are like your maybe FMCG, or let's say automotive. So each industry has its own challenge. And the interesting part is that we talk about your scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. So what could be let's say scope 2 for one company, it becomes a scope 3 for the company, right? And this is, I think, a very good visualization also when we're talking of your scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. I think, and this is something we can discuss during break time also. And what I feel, and talking to all of you, and organizations have a very good handle on scope 1, scope 2 measurement. Right? It is easy to measure the greenhouse emissions from your own assets. Maybe the electricity that you're purchasing to run your plants. But the moment you get into scope 3, and especially it's like 70-75% of contribution to the overall emissions. And this is something I was talking about previously also, that to solve these kind of problems, it's not just a technology game, because you can't just put on the suppliers and float a questionnaire to your 1,000 suppliers, and that one supplier is getting that questionnaires from all 100 customers. It will cause fatigue, right? So that's where maybe, if I have to give an analogy, and this happened like, I know 10 years back, 15 years back, the way telecom companies came together, and, they formed these companies for passive infrastructure, companies like Indus Tower and all that. And they kept the differentiation on active infrastructure with us, right? So it was a competitive alliance, but collaborating. Similarly, I think that some thought process has to go, that how do you collaborate with your competition so that, it keeps it doesn't cause supplier fatigue, but it also help manage your overall compliance and, add overall value. So what does this translate into, and this in terms of, how do you manage your overall risk and keep your supply chain resilient, ensuring your overall compliance to your regulation, driving sustainability at scale, and also with no compromise on cost and productivity. I think Amit talked about, the way expectation from procurement, to cut more number of RFQs, and then if you look at the product lifecycle becoming shorter, and so whether you spend time on cutting RFQs or building relationship with suppliers and working on innovations. So with this, what's the role technology has to play? And it was eye-opener for me. Maybe that was a global slide, what you showed with maybe some 200 plus solution providers across your upstream procurement, downstream procurement, and S2P. And it's a big challenge, if you look at, all of you are running business, right? And to manage your, let's say, your S2P process, upstream, downstream, if you have to depend on 10 different systems and start integrating, it's not an easy job, right? So I'll cover some of those things, and I think maybe this slide, it summarizes very well that, everyone has a ERP, right? But today, if you look at all the strategic discussion with the suppliers, it's happening on emails, your Excel sheets and all that, your cost models on Excel sheets, you take a subscription to your ICIS, download those indexes, do calculations and all that. And procurement is a complex subject, one key reason is, as we pass on the control to the next generation, how do we pass on this knowledge? See, one thing, maybe I've been into sales all my life. I have learned from all of you. And there was a time in my career, I was also talking to your chief marketing officers and all that, right? And what I realized, to reach a level, in supply chain, it took me like 20 years. When I was selling marketing, I was at a level, I'm not talking marketing from your ads and all. That's a very creative job. I'm talking of space of the digital marketing. It was like my knowledge levels were as good as my son's knowledge level. So that's the difference. Supply chain, the complexity is very different, and it's very important that how do we capture that knowledge? Because today, if you look at, with all the experience also, and, with all these disjointed solutions on sourcing, you negotiate very well. I think I just heard that, in the contract, you negotiate your payment terms. It's a long-term contract. You have economies of scale. Your prices are changing year 1, year 2, year 3. And suddenly you realize I'm still paying the old price, right? And with all the fluctuation in the commodities and all that, if the price of a commodity will increases, your supply will come running to you. But if it's not favorable to him, that, right? And you're doing this for thousands of SKUs. See, everyone is doing it. But my point is that with all this increasing responsibilities, how do you get that peace of mind and free up the bandwidth of your team to do more of strategic things and have some systems which will prevent the overall leakages on your negotiated contracts and drive the overall productivity, right? And that's where this slide demonstrates that because of disjointed process, that, how do you lose that value and visibility and over a period of time. And so the point here is that, and maybe this is the same slide, but what it demonstrates is that the value that you can achieve, across your categories. I'm not just talking of your indirect, but I'm talking on your direct and the capex categories also. It's much, much higher. And, Amit had mentioned some of those metrics and all that respect to improvement in your, savings, or how much of more spend you can address because of your integrated solutions. And, also managing your overall compliance and driving innovation journeys with your supply base. This is interesting, and I think this is a recent trend, all the research Gartner and Forrester did last year. For the first time, they published your report on S2P, because till 2023, they were just publishing reports on sourcing, contract management, P2P. But what they realized, talking to different customers, that, you're giving like 10 different systems to your suppliers, right? They're getting confused. And these 10 different systems are not talking to each other. And then as a procurement, you're also not able to get an insight. Something as simple as, you go for a strategic supplier meeting, at a click, I want to see that how much business I'm doing with suppliers, what is contract performance, when is contracts expiring, right? What is this area of improvement? You know how much time it takes today, right? So one of the observation was maybe, having, and to your point, end-to-end automation, end-to-end automation respect that can drive your, the harmonization of data across categories, across your suppliers to give you those insights, help you with adoption. The one single interface for your suppliers for all your strategic and transactional activities, right? So maybe it's one unified portal. He wants to check his invoice status. Let him check. He has to reply to RFQ, or he has to work on, let's say, sustainability improvement initiatives, or he has to work on some new ideas. One single portal to manage all that collaboration, so that's what is very important. And efficiency, right? Efficiency in terms of, tools having in place that works for strategic sourcing, tactical sourcing, also the tail end spend, right? Because the needs are very different in terms of how do you configure and templatize that to drive those efficiencies. And the last one is more on collaboration, which is respect to your new ideas or integrations with your PLM applications to optimize your price at the time of new product launches, or let's say, driving your sustainability initiatives and all that. So I think this is one key paradigm shift that happened in technology, where organizations were looking at multiple applications, at least for the internal data, to, let's say, a unified platform that can help them drive better adoption, better savings, and address more spend. And then just to give a perspective, maybe, how does it look like, right? So one is, everyone has made investments, I'm not sure if everyone has made investments on the ERP. And if you look at the S2P tools can help you solve problems on overall your onboarding of suppliers, managing the qualifications, running your RFQ for all kind of categories, whether it's just a spot bid, or maybe, you're getting the complete cost breakdown, or maybe, you have your own zero-based case costing, having a reference price, and what's my margin of negotiation for that, managing your contract life cycle, and then the downstream procurement to make sure whatever you negotiated is getting realized, right? But at the same time, if you look at where things gets complicated, that you just can't rely on internal information, right? If I add, so this will help you maybe drive a lot of insights if you do that, and that's a foundation. But we talked about your managing your risk, managing your sustainability, your innovation, right? And that's where, if you look at your architecture, should be able to ingest information, not from simple things like maybe doing a GST check, or let's say your input tax credit check, but also your strategic things like maybe the sentiment about the suppliers on the social media, right? Maybe if there are any negative news, any weather alerts, or maybe there are any kind of macroeconomic disruptions and all that. How to bring all that information which is there, right? One is you keep on searching and all that but how do you kind of get that in a very structured manner from these different sources, and which many of you would be doing also, right? So when I talk to some of my customers in chemical, they are have subscription to your ICIS, right? And some pharma customers, they have subscription tools like your SmartCube and all that for category intelligence. So that is there. But how do you kind of integrate and then kind of get a very kind of a unified view of your categories in terms of maybe, what are those trends in the market, maybe, whether I should go for my, the long term, or maybe I should do a spot purchasing, what my should be cost should look like, what is my supplier risk. So that's where, the architect should be able to, kind of unify this internal and external information to give a proper unified view. But the point is that as a starting point, you still need to have a foundation that synergizes your internal processes for all your categories. And if you look at, I saw a lot of, those different players and all that in the previous presentation. And, so these are some of them. So let's say if you have implemented a tool to digitize your processes on sourcing, supplier management, and let's say post-PO collaboration, and respect to your data in the external world, so things like your DNB or Moody's. Many times the question comes for India suppliers who are not listed. There are organizations like Save Risk and all that, which can give you those kind of sentiments for your Indian suppliers, your EcoVadis for sustainability, or your, let's say, C2FO for early payment discounts and all that. So one has to think through in terms of, what are those, in addition to your internal information on your suppliers and category and historical spend, what are the data from the external world that makes sense for us. And then you basically are able to build up your category 360 or whatever you call as a supplier 360 profile to augment your decision making. Okay. And then this one is on the sustainability and see, in the life it's all about your, I would say, your 80-20 rule, right? So if you look at whether it's your cost optimization or if you're trying to solve problem of sustainability, understanding your baseline and the suppliers who are contributing to 80% of emissions, and how do you my baseline on their greenhouse gases respect to your primary data, secondary data. And once we know that how do I collaborate with them on the areas of improvement, define those targets and measure that, and then integrate that to my sourcing strategy also. Because at the end of the day, I want to source more from my green suppliers. So that's where, the strategic outlook in terms of how you digitize your processes around sustainability, both using your internal information and the external information from third parties like your Axiobase or let's say your CDP and all that, who collects a lot of data and, which could be based on physical or let's say the price data, right? Because if you're buying fuel, typically you know how much fuel you're buying and there's a emission factor linked to that, you can get from CDP. But if you're buying, let's say, insurance services, it's more driven by price, and there's a back-end calculation. So you have to leverage those kind of third-party systems and all that to build up a overall sustainable profile for a supplier, and then link it to your internal information also. You want to know how much I'm spending with suppliers, right? Is it a strategic supplier for me? What's his performance? And then you can work out your contingency plans and the business continuity plans. Okay. Now coming to your, let's say the Gen AI, and this year now everyone is talking of agentic AI. So we have a new buzzword, and so what we'll share our experience, what we have seen practically at this point of time. That how you can leverage Gen AI to maybe kind of create content for you, which could be respect to your insights on your category, or let's say maybe an auto creation of your RFQs for tactical spend, right? Why do you want, if I have done the spend, I know there are 10 suppliers, let system generate the RFQ, send it to a supplier, get the prices, give a target price to supplier, award it. Why to spend time? It's just a spot bet, for me, right? So we look at, those are the kind of use cases which we have seen. One is respect to your researching your publicly available information, or their supply discovery tools, to help you find more supply base for your categories and all that. And then big use case is on analyzing your documents, your contracts, right? The 40-page documents. What are those risky clauses? What are my key obligations on those contracts and all that? And the last one in terms of maybe automating respect to your maybe looking at your supplier KPI scorecards. What are those areas of improvements and all that, or maybe those kind of things which you can do. And what it means is, in terms of the use cases, and if you look at these are on those different categories and all that. But if I pick some of them, like let's say your category intelligence assistant, right? So the category intelligence assistant is more, let's say, if I want to understand the price trends for, let's say, the caustic soda, maybe, how is the global demand and supply balances, how the trends are changing. So it becomes a directional input for a category buyer and all that. And then you have on the same screen, you have your spend data, your POs, performance, you can take those directional calls and all that to help you augment the decision making and all that, right? Other some key use cases are more on the contract management. I talked about the summarization of contract documents, especially for your capex and all that, extracting your obligations from the contracts and all that, and make it part of a structured data to manage your compliance. And some other things would be maybe generating let's say improvement plan for a supplier based on his KPIs respect to your quality, cost, delivery, and all that. So those kind of things you can do. And I think when I was doing my keynote and I was talking about where we have seen Gen AI use cases. So if you ask me, these use cases may be accept use case on your category or contract. These are like incremental improvements. These are not like transformational gains and all that, right? So that's where and if you talk about a transformational gains, and let's say if we talk about price risk. So price risk, and let's say for example, if you are from a metal mining company, and let's say a coal is a huge spend for you, right? Now those kind of categories and all that predicting is if you have to build a model. I was talking to one of the gentlemen at Tata Steel like 2 years back, and they have built up a model using 100 parameters. So those things would not be solved by Gen AI and all that, and that gives you real intelligence. So that's what I'm saying is we have to see, everyone is talking about predicting spend and all that, right? But the whole problem is unless you solve this data problem, right? Unless you know these parameters and all that, Gen AI is just kind of giving you some incremental improvement in productivity and all that. You cannot underwrite the technology. Definitely huge productivity gains, right? But in terms of for your direct material, you think that Gen AI has reached a level, it can help you achieve some savings? I think there's still a long way to go, right? We'll discuss more on that in terms of, but these are some of the use cases, what we have done at this point of time. And I think maybe just quickly, I know we have some customers who are working with us, but maybe, some organizations who don't know, at a very, I would say, 35,000 feet level, what we do, and we work with our customers to help them digitize processes across the source to pay for all categories. So our focus is not just indirect, but we work with customers on your capex and direct categories also, both for upstream and downstream procurement processes. And across these processes, we have embedded your Gen AI use cases and templates to drive your productivity and reduce your time to market. Our team is here, and we're happy to discuss and answer your questions. So with this, I will end my presentation. Thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you.
We can take the questions. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Yeah, hi, good morning. You referred about taking help of Gen AI in various cases, and now the major concern is with regard to the security of the data and the organization. So how can we tackle that? We can take help in drafting the contract and all other things. But again, we are exposing our data to the net. So how to tackle that?
No, I think that's a very good question. And you're right. So what we do in those cases, so we are using your third-party large language models. So we use those LLM from your Microsoft Enterprise APIs for that. But if you look at, for Gen AI to work, you give a prompt, it fires a LLM model, and then give you the output. So what we do is, your prompts and the output, which remains within our own application. So it's not being used to train any third-party large language models. And we are able to do that because we are paying Microsoft for that, right? Those are enterprise APIs and all that. So from that perspective, we understand this is all confidential data, about your prices, contracts and all that. And, and this is a competitive advantage, how you are negotiating. So we understand that confidentiality and data privacy. And then that's the way we have architected the solution.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My question is, how can digitization help in strengthening the governance? Because there's always a residual risk. And as you front load the process to business, right, you think that the policies will govern the process. But the enforcement of the policies, how do you control that through digitization?
See, I would say, we spend, and that's, I think, maybe one of the key reason also, I was attending a conference, and it was asked to one of the CPO, what is the business case for S2P digitization? And he just answered, forget about everything, compliance, because when you're doing things at a scale, and there's so much of pressure and all that, and he said, just go back and look at your last audit observations. It will give the business case. So from that perspective, so one is, so procurement is responsible for, your negotiating with suppliers, converting into contracts and all that. And then you have defined your SOPs, how business will leverage those contracts and thresholds around your approvals and all that. So system will enforce those controls. And if there are any exceptions being taken, it will kind of throw those alerts and all that. So it's more proactive. And then an entire journey, what we're talking of, see the things when get missed, you have one solution for sourcing, one for contract, one for PO, they're not talking to each other. There's a manual intervention, things can get missed. But the moment you bring kind of an integrated view, the system will ensure that, you have our audit trails and all that. So a lot of our customers, what they do is when the auditors are coming, they say, this is your login. Please go and check everything in the system. You pick up a RFQ, which was done 2 years back, what contract was created, how the PO was created on that, the entire, kind of a backward traceability and all that. So that's where, we don't want procurement to spend time answering audit questions.
How do you foresee the ESC coming years? Especially the considering the system, the infrastructure, and the policy. How could we use it? Why are these the door and the
So, he would say, if you see the mandate from Indian government also, and they are mandating, I think, your top 1,000 companies by market cap to declare on, your scope 3 emissions and all that, right? So I would say that, it has to be a very integral part of your supply chain. And in the coming times, I'm sure governments will become more and more strict, to ensure that you have put your policies and regulations in place, and because you look at each country has taken those targets, and I think the target for India is to be, I think, to be carbon neutral by 2070, right? So the journey has started, and there is a target, to reduce 50% by 2030. Right, so that's already it's in progress, and then that's where the procurement teams, especially if I look at your FMCG, the companies are working on your recycled packaging and all that, right? And everyone is talking about your green steel. There's a big use case for your green hydrogen. So if you look at across industry, a lot of work is happening, because maybe when we started this 2 years back, maybe just kind of a boredom discussions. But today there are some organizations, I'm not, as talked about some European companies who have put, there is some organization, they have a title of a Chief Sustainability Officer. So there is a lot of focus, and, it has to be very integral part of your supply chain.
Okay. So Harsh, first of all, really thanks. And the way Amit and you covered a lot of synergy we found on the digitalization and how future looks like.
We didn't get together.
No, but it was really good synergy we found. So one piece which I want to know about the supplier risk score. Sometime like you have showcased Duns and Bradstreet, and a lot of companies showcase the supplier risk. Sometimes they say out of 10, they are really good. 8, you are de-risk. But suddenly supplier come to us, they say we are discontinuing this product. Something like that. Sometimes their plant have some problems on EHS piece. So how AI is there, but how, of course, market intelligence and human intelligence, that is vital place. But how to ensure that suppliers are really not in risk? We get this proactive approach or anything on this, your perspective?
See, no simple answer. And, so one is, these systems and all that will provide you insights, what is available publicly. But it goes back to our fundamentals. The way we do that. The 2x2 matrix on category. What are my strategic categories? What are my bottleneck categories and all that. So you have to prioritize. These are my strategic categories. What is the information I have from DNB and Moody's around that? Then I'm sure with the strategic categories you have your QBRs with the suppliers and all that. More due diligence. You working with them on new product development and all that. So that's the only way. There will be some surprises, but that's why when I was talking about the supplier relationship management, is going to get more important, especially with new emerging technologies. Because the supply base is very limited. So supplier has a choice. As long as there is a constrained capacity, they will choose customers rather than you choosing suppliers.
Absolutely. And ESG, he also covered it well. So because supply will not work the way you want work, I think that
Absolutely.
it's a gap.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Last question.
Thanks, Harsh. I would like to understand from you, from the Ivalua organization point of view, you talked about the scope 3 emissions, which is a challenge to all of us in the industry for the buyer community. Identifying the risk associated to the category or the business partners. Is there anything in your in Ivalua's pipeline to address that area so that the buying team or the buyers, while selecting a business partner or selecting a category, they come to know about some, in terms of, the scope 3 emissions, where are those partners lie? And the categories, even how vulnerable are they in terms of scope 3 emissions? Is there anything in the pipeline?
See, what we are doing is, so one is, we have built up a data model, how you can, ingest data, for your category and supplier and geography, from your, let's say, your primary source or let's say your secondary source and all that. At this point of time, there are some projects happening, where we are kind of exploring with different third-party data sources, because data is a huge challenge, what I was talking about, and there are some experiments happening with CDP or let's say, I think, Axiobase, and there's one more company. So we're also trying to learn, at this point of time, which make more sense, and maybe it could be for a specific industry. So at this point of time, what we have mastered is the data model, the information that you want to capture, to drive insights, collaborate with suppliers and all that. Now we're solving that data problem.
Thank you so much, Harsh, for the wonderful presentation.